Welcome back. It's time for chapters 13 and 14. Where we left off the last time was when my guy best friend suddenly got engaged and got married really quick, and how I was reacting to that. And so that kind of just gives you an update. For those of you that this is your first time here, my name is Jill. I am reading my book, which is called Free Will, um, chapter by chapter here on my YouTube channel, because I just like as many XJWs to hear the story. And I think it just hearing other people's stories, we see all these similarities and things that are so different in each of our circumstances, but there's so many common threads. And I don't know, I just think it's so cathartic and therapeutic for us to be able to hear each other's stories. And I think there's little tidbits that we can get from listening to other people express um, their experiences within that organization, especially in retrospect after they've gone. So, since my book's been out for a while and it is available on ebook and paperback on Amazon, and the links down there, but I figured this was a really great way to allow some XJWs in the very large growing community here on YouTube to be able to hear the book. So welcome back to Storytime if you've been here before, and welcome for the first time if you just got here. I'm so happy to have you. Please share it with anybody that you think might like, and please, if you want to, subscribe. And I'd love to hear your comments. It's really great to get the feedback and just hear anything from you guys after you do a little listening to the story time. So we'll go back into the book now in chapter 13. And I'm talking about my best friend that just got married here. It really did hit hard that he was out of my life. He was the friend that I had spent most of my time with. I played it off that it didn't bother me, and truthfully, I wasn't even consciously aware of how deeply it had affected me. I had gotten accustomed to seeing him every day. He was the one I told my secrets to, the one who got me, my sense of humor, my way. Having him exit my life so suddenly and so completely left a gaping void. The most fun I'd always had was with him. In the following months, I began to really start thinking a lot more about what I wanted in life, like big picture stuff. I think losing my best friend like that made me kind of regroup and reevaluate some things. There were no guys at church I wanted to hang out with, but at school, different story. I wanted to have fun. Mom would never let me date guys from school. Over the next year, we would have some pretty big blow-ups over me wanting to date guys from school. I was feeling really locked down. The church and my mom's implementation of the rules made me feel trapped. That year in school, I was honored to be on the homecoming court. As great as it made me feel to have this happen, it was something the church would frown on. So I had to play it very low key. The JWs frown on this sort of thing. Firstly, because it's like one of the reasonings against birthday celebrations. They teach that we shouldn't participate in anything that brings too much honor to any one person. And secondly, because I would be attending the homecoming game and dance, there would be too much fraternization with the non believers. Another JW girl from school approached me and self righteously announced that her parents would never allow her to participate in the homecoming. It bit my lip, wanting to say, "Well, I guess you don't have to worry about it, do ya?" Her cocky, superior tone rubbed me the wrong way. I wanted to enjoy this special school experience, but I was made to feel guilty and embarrassed about it by the JW set. My mom eventually compromised and told me I could go to homecoming. Yay! This was a huge concession. I couldn't believe she said yes, but she also made it clear that I could only go if a JW guy was my escort for the night, and of course I would be chaperoned. This did not go over well with me. I wanted so much to ask my old boyfriend Dwayne to escort me. We had begun to talk a little bit at school. The old flames were starting to be rekindled. I dreamt of what a great night homecoming would be with him. But Mom put up the gauntlet. She said, "No way." I pushed back, arguing my side with the gusto of a teenager in love. I must have dug my heels in pretty hard. This was the first and only time that this had ever happened. In my stubborn teenage angst and attitude and fighting for my way, I pissed my mom off to the point that she slapped me across the face. Red-cheeked and shocked and mad as a hornet, I stormed off to my room. As I ruminated, thought it through. I would end up missing the whole experience if I didn't do what my mom wanted. I simmered down and reassessed. I knew a JW guy that I could go with. He was cute and kind and was the brother of one of my good friends. I had it on reliable authority that he would say yes. This is where I tell you what an asshole I was the night of homecoming. I was never a mean girl, but looking back on how I behaved that night, it's one of the few things I am ashamed of in my life. Poor Bob was very willing to go with me. He rented a tux at his own expense. He was older than me. He didn't go to my school and had in fact already graduated. The night of the homecoming, it was decided that my stepsister Cindy would be our chaperone. And I should probably mention that Cindy had a huge crush on this guy. So she got to witness me using her heartthrob for my own selfish benefit. I say using because after the game, when we all assembled in the gymnasium auditorium for the dance, I immediately abandoned Bob, leaving him sitting alone in the bleachers, while I went and danced with Dwayne and a few other guys for the rest of the night. I know, what a jerk. I selfishly rationalized that at least Cindy would be hanging out with him and she liked him anyway, so it'd be fine. It's no excuse. It was selfish and thoughtless, but I found myself using the situation to skirt my mom's rules and get my own way in the only way I could conjure. I felt guilty even that night, especially as Bob drove me and Cindy home and offered to take us out to eat. I told him I was tired and wanted to go home right away. Passion had won out. I had gotten to be with Dwayne at least for a little bit. All of the rules in the house and in the church were tiresome. Independence and freedom beckoned. This chapter is reminding me when my very first version of my book, I did a soundtrack, and so I put songs in between all the, because music has always been such a huge thing in my life. And it was kind of like music of the times, but music that also kind of, and for this one I had Hot Child in the City, by Nick Gilder, if anybody remembers that one. Because I was ready to go and have some fun, but I was kept in the cage for now. Okay, let's go on to chapter 14. My brothers and I still went to my dad's every other weekend. I saw how my sister Sandy had so much freedom living at Dad's house. She could come and go as she pleased. She could date whoever she wanted. She was having a lot of fun. One weekend, I couldn't get it out of my head. I thought about the possibility of living with my dad. There would be no more stepdad, no more JW church, no more strict rules about everything. I didn't have the courage to tell my dad while I was at his house this particular weekend, probably because I was afraid he might try to talk me out of it. I was afraid he might say no. It took me just a smidgen more time to be brave enough to do what I had wanted to do. Dad and Marianne dropped us off at the house after our weekend with them. As soon as I got home, there were chores to do, and stepdad was bitching about one thing and then another. It was everything I hated about my home hitting me on the head when I walked in. I snapped. I wanted out of here. I waited long enough that I knew Dad would be back home. I grabbed the orange kitchen phone and stretched the long, springy cord so that I could go into the laundry room behind the kitchen for privacy. I shut the door, pinching the springy cord in the door jamb. I called Dad. In whispered voice, I said I wanted to come live with him. I asked him if he could please come get me. He questioned me to be sure this is what I wanted. I was sure. I could tell Dad knew how serious I was. I was too scared to tell Mom. I couldn't take it. The drama, the guilt, the fear of letting her down. I told my mom I was going next door to my friend Jane's house to hang out for a while. A nervous wreck, I sat in Jane's room, spying out the window for Dad's car to pull up. I was shaking. When he pulled up in front of the house, I bolted out of Jane's house and jumped in his 280Z. I yelled at him to go, go, go! I didn't want to face Mom. Dad took off quickly, but then stopped at the nearest payphone to call Mom and let her know I was with him. As he described it to me, he asked her, "Do you know where Jill is?" She said, "Yes, she's next door at her friend's house." He said, "No, she's not. She's with me. She wants to come and live with me for a while." Being terrified of making Mom mad and letting her down had shaken me up. But when I got to Dad's, I was glad of my choice. It felt so strange to be there when it was at the weekend. It felt like I got to look behind the curtain at how their life really was. As I drifted off to sleep, I played the imagined reaction of my mom in my head. God, she must be so upset, I thought. I had none of my things and would have to go back home at some point to get clothes and stuff. Oh, how I was dreading that. I borrowed clothes from Sandy for a day or two, but I had to make plans to go home and get my stuff. A few days later, I borrowed Dad's car after he had gotten done with work for the day. The plan was to get my stuff and turn around and come right back. When I arrived at Mom's house, the strain between Mom and I was palpable. She was mad. I grabbed as much of my stuff as I could as quickly as possible, wanting to avoid a confrontation. I just threw it all in a giant hefty bag. Mom seemed like she was trying not to even acknowledge me. But when I finished gathering stuff that I wanted, I went to find the car keys. They were gone. I frantically searched for them everywhere that I had been in the house. Suddenly, behind me, Mom shook the keys in her hand. She said I wasn't going anywhere. I told her I had to get back with Dad's car. I was really paranoid about pissing Dad off for not bringing his car back right away. He had to take it to work in the morning. She said she didn't care. She said we were going to talk. Oh my God, I would have done anything not to be facing this. I can't remember much of the conversation from that night. But I know eventually I told her I wanted to do worldly things, mostly dating. Even though I was terrified, I was blunt. After all, I was in this deep, I may as well tell her the truth. I definitely made it known that I didn't want to be a Jehovah's Witness anymore. Like I said, the exact conversation of that night is fuzzy now, but I do remember Mom telling me that in moving to Dad's house, I had stabbed her in the back. It struck me that this conversation was not about me. This was about my mom's feelings. Everything I had experienced throughout my parents' divorce had trained me not to hurt my mom and to protect her from any pain if I could. Suddenly, I was facing the fact that I was hurting her. I was letting her down, and my decision to go to Dad's was perceived as a violent, unkind act toward her. Never mind how I felt. The next few days at Dad's house, I was feeling out of sorts. Mostly, this feeling came from the dread that I was hurting Mom. I tried to talk to her on the phone a couple of times. I was met with coldness. I'm sure she thought tough love would bring me back around. I was not used to this. Mom had always been the most supportive and loving person. It hurt, and fear crept into me, like a virus taking over. I couldn't stop thinking that I had to make it right. I was only at Dad's for a week or two. I made arrangements to have a talk with Mom about possibly coming home. We sat on her bed and talked. I told her that I would come home, but I wanted some things to change. I said I didn't want to go to church meetings anymore. She said if I was living under her roof that I would be required to attend meetings. I said I wanted to date non-JW guys from school or guys that I met at my job. She said no, that would not be allowed. She basically told me, of course she wanted me home, but I would have to live the way she wanted. I came home. I ached for Mom's approval. I hated her being mad at me. I felt like a fish out of water at Dad's. I caved. I accepted that for now, this is what I had to do. I finished high school with what felt to me like a very unfulfilled social life and was confused about what I really wanted. The decision to stay home with Mom created in me the need to accept the religion and all that came with it, or to be in constant discord with my mom. I guess it felt like if you can't beat 'em, join 'em. Going along with the program was not easy to do halfway. I eventually took to trying my best to hold tight to the faith that I had always known. I put aside the doubts and disputes that had arisen in me and worked hard at being a part of the organization. So I love this chapter because it really illustrates to me, I already kind of knew who I was, and I tried with all my might to be honest about how I felt, but it became, for me, in my experience, it's kind of like my mom was Jehovah's side, my dad was Satan's side, because it's so black and white with witnesses, and I couldn't just not be a witness and be a good person. Of course, I was like choosing the enemy if I didn't want to be a witness, just like my mom. And how you have to face your parents being, and I know so many people for various reasons growing up have to deal with this, where they have to face the fact that they're in complete discord with their parents. Their parents are disappointed with them, mad at them. Sometimes, kick them to the curb, as we all know. We've heard these stories, so many of them. And the organization creates a situation where even as you're coming of age, you're old enough to drive and have a job, you're still required to be under, you're under these people's roof, and so you have to be in the church rules and everything. So anyway, I digress. So let's go on to chapter 15. By the time I graduated high school, much to my relief, my mom had grown very tired of my dad's verbal and emotionally abusive behavior. She chose to separate from him, moving us, my two brothers and I, to a tiny apartment in South Orange County. Mom made this decision while I was on a month-long graduation trip to Minneapolis, Minnesota to visit all my relatives, including my cousin, who was one of my best friends. So when I returned home, I found myself a high school graduate in a new city, a new home, very far from all my friends. You would think I would have been a bit thrown. I was a little, but I was so glad not to be in the same house as my stepdad. It was worth it. And since I had just graduated, it was a great time for me to start somewhere new. Plus, we now lived a couple minutes from the beach, and I love the ocean. I got a job at the Mission Viejo Mall. I worked in the handbag and accessory department at May Company. I really liked my job and met a lot of nice people. I also began to make some new friends at our JW congregation at the beach. The beach lifestyle agreed with me. I was getting comfortable, making my own money, and having fun. Then one day, the shit hit the fan. My mom tells me, this is after 6 months of being without him, my mom tells me she's seeing stepdad again. WTF. Are you kidding me? For months, we've been free of that negative influence, and now you're inviting it back in our lives? She told me I didn't understand. She was right. I didn't. One night, soon after, Mom told me we were all going to dinner with stepdad. I was a rude bitch that night. With crossed arms, I sat indignantly. I refused to order anything at the restaurant and uncharacteristically wouldn't contribute to the conversation. After dinner, stepdad came back with us to our peaceful little apartment. The tranquil safe haven we'd become nestled in felt like it was being invaded by the enemy to me. I stormed upstairs and slammed the bedroom door. Mom came up behind me. She sat down and asked me what was wrong. I told her she was crazy to let that man back into her life, back into our life. She said that he'd change, that now it would be different. I replied, then why is he listening in on our private conversation right now? Nothing's changed. Just then we both heard his footsteps as he quickly scurried away from the other side of the door. My mom's head dropped and she left me alone. When I awoke the next morning, Mom was sitting on my bed next to me as I sleepily opened my eyes. She told me she was pregnant. I was shocked in silence. I never said another negative word about them getting back together. We all moved into a family house in Mission Viejo. Mom lost the baby several weeks later. It was a girl. They wanted to name her Sarah. She would be 34 now. So, a lot of roller coasters, a lot of back and forth. But obviously at this point, I'm out of high school. I'm getting pretty independent, so I'm not at the house too long, and then things really start to change dramatically. Thank you so much for continuing to listen. I really appreciate your support, and I love being part of the community. Love hearing your comments. So please send me a message if you feel moved to. Remember to subscribe and like the video. It really helps a lot. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day or evening. Take care.